how you use that power and why, right? So that quote, there is a power for good in the universe greater than you are, and use it, is Ernest Holmes, the author of Science of Mind and the founder of the church that eventually became Centers for Spiritual Living, and this is a Center for Spiritual Living church. And he said that every single time he did a radio broadcast, every single time he did a television broadcast, he would repeat that quote, because it is so foundational to everything that he taught and everything that he learned and knew about how to work with spirit, how to use spiritual principles, and why you would do it. Oh, I just returned from a week, well, almost a week, spent up in the Santa Cruz Mountains with ministerial students and ministers for the Centers for Spiritual Living, from all over the world. And it was an incredible time. And we watched a video, a YouTube clip, which I highly recommend all of you to look at, by Andy Andrews, called The Butterfly Effect. And he's also the author of a book called The Butterfly Effect. And Andy Andrews says, every single thing you do matters. You have been created as one of a kind. You have been created in order to make a difference. You have within you the power to change the world. And in this video, he tells a really powerful story of the effect that one man had on the world, saving 2 billion people by hybridizing wheat and saving 2 billion lives, credited with saving 2 billion lives on the planet from starvation. And then he asks the question of, well, was it really him who deserved the credit? And he looks behind that at his mentor, who was Vice President Henry Wallace of the Roosevelt administration, who actually had created one of the vice presidents, I think Roosevelt had 3. He created, when he was Secretary of Agriculture, the department that hired this guy and charged him with hybridizing wheat. Maybe he saved the 2 billion lives, he said. And then he started thinking, he said, well, maybe not. Maybe you got to look before Henry Wallace. Henry Wallace says that when he was 6 years old, what inspired him to go into agriculture and what inspired him in the power of food and its effect on mankind was that George Washington Carver talked to him and spent time with him and taught him about it. He was one of his teachers when he was 6 years old. So maybe George Washington Carver is who saved 2 billion lives on the planet from starvation. But then he asked himself, well, maybe you could look before that and you could look at a Missouri farmer who, at a time when slavery was legal and common in Missouri, chose not to have slaves and had a mother and son on his farm that were close friends, who, when raiders came through, killing everyone and scorching the farm, took the mother and son away. And Moses, the farmer, rode his horse 5 hours and arranged for the raiders to meet him to get back that mother and son. And they did not give him back the mother, but they threw a burlap sack at him with a near-dead baby in it. And he scooped out that baby and put him in his coat and walked back days to the farm because he had traded his horse for that burlap sack and promised to raise that baby as his own. And that was Moses Carver, who raised George Washington. So maybe he is the one. And you see, You can't ever find the one, because we're all the one. Because every single one of us has that power. Because every single one of us matters. And what we do matters. And what we choose matters. And what we say matters. And what we think matters. And if you think about it, actually that term, I'm actually fascinated by that term, you matter, when I think about it. Because matter, I have always thought of predominantly as a noun. Matter, you know, we're made out of matter. This is matter. But the verb to matter, you matter, is really just a way of saying what we've always said in science of mind, which is that thoughts become things. That which is you, your thoughts, your consciousness, right? Because I'm not my car, my job, my wonderful husband, my 2 kids, but I am this personality, this constellation of thoughts, this consciousness that is me, and that is what becomes the car, the husband, the children. That consciousness living in form, making choices, acting with the power greater than me, whether consciously or unconsciously. And that's a very important point. We're all working with spiritual principle at all times, whether we know it or not. Whether we know it or not. I was working with spiritual principle when I chose to be a yo-yo dieter for most of my life, gaining and losing weight. And I was, for many times of my life, 50, 60, 70, 80 pounds heavier than I am today. There's a Russian proverb, which I was planning to talk about today, and Alan's song reminded me of a little. You probably heard it. It's pray and row to shore, right? So if you're out in a boat in the middle of the ocean, you want to get to shore, prayer is good, but row like hell to get to shore. And I was working with spiritual principle. I was pointed towards the shore of losing weight for decades. Because I didn't know how to work with spiritual principle, I focused my attention on losing weight. And guess what? Spirit gave me many opportunities to lose weight because I would gain it again. So you have to be careful, and you need to know where your shore is as you're working with this power and you're working with spiritual principle. Point your boat to shore and make sure it's the right shore. I don't want to lose weight today. What I want is to be a healthy body weight. That's what I want. And my rowing also has to be conscious, and it has to be the right kind of rowing. So rowing can take many forms in our life as I use my power and purpose to affect the world. It can be as simple as knowing where the shore is, holding that, praying and looking for opportunities to move the shore. But if I have oars and I have a boat, that's my opportunity and I have to use it, right? And I have to use it today. I can't tell you how many diets I started tomorrow. Those never come. Today is the day that I row to shore. I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. I don't know if it'll ever come. I don't know if there will be sharks in the ocean. I don't know if there will be a storm. I have today, and I can row to shore. Focus on what I want and what I don't want in that boat. Not only focusing on the healthy body weight, but focusing on, well, for example, at this retreat this past week, there was this little section where they had gluten-free cookies. And I don't eat cookies. But somehow, and I don't eat wheat, so I convinced myself that because it was called gluten-free, then I could eat that. And I had a couple of those, and then I realized, well, that's not for me. And then I started thinking, no gluten-free cookies, no gluten-free cookies. Well, it turns out that spirit only hears, and my brain only hears, and this is hard science, by the way, it only hears gluten-free cookies. It doesn't hear the no. So if I'm rowing towards the shore of no gluten-free cookies, guess where I'm going to get gluten-free cookies, which, by the way, are every bit as sweet and probably sweeter than regular cookies. A great book on the science behind all that is The End of Overeating by David Kessler, which actually could be used for the science behind all spiritual principle. It's another Science of Mind book. But there are more important examples than weight loss for how to row to shore, how to pray and row to shore for me. A few years ago, I got a vision, many years ago, I got a vision of me involved in reconciliation, involved in powerful conversations and breaking down barriers around race. And I got that vision. So that's a shore for me that I can choose to row to. And I saw that vision, but at the time when I was first having that vision, I looked around me and every close friend I had was white. So I had to really say, wow, I'm far out in the ocean. I'm really far out in the ocean. If that's my vision, how am I going to get to that shore? And I can't say that it was all conscious, because I want to emphasize that although we can consciously choose to use this power, it's working us, and we are using it no matter what we choose, and no matter whether it's conscious or not. But I did keep coming back to that vision. I kept pointing my boat to shore. And eventually, I asked for help. And I asked for help by starting to be vulnerable and open to myself and to God and to the people around me, and to say, I don't know how I'm ever going to get to that. I need help. I need to know how to make these friendships and relationships, how to start having these conversations. I'm scared. I'm scared I'm going to say the wrong thing. I'm scared I'm going to hurt feelings. I'm scared I'm going to alienate people. I'm scared of making mistakes. And I began to admit that, and I began to pray for the boat and the oars to get to this shore. And I began to be given opportunities. I began to be given that boat and those oars. I began to be surrounded by fellow students in classes at the Center for Spiritual Awareness. Students, and finally students in practitioner studies and students in ministerial studies. And then the last job I was given was working for a union that represented about 70% people of color, and I was surrounded by people of color and our members, and I had incredible opportunities to have these conversations, and I just kept being shown to be vulnerable and to admit what I didn't know and to make mistakes, and I kept being given permission to make mistakes and opportunities. And I really just thought that vision, if you had asked me even a month ago, even 10 days ago, that vision, I would have said, oh, we're a long ways from shore. But last week, 4 other students and I gave a presentation up in the Santa Cruz Mountains, and we told our stories. We told where we came from. I told about my mother growing up in the cradle of the Confederacy with separate entrances for blacks and Jews, and my father having our phone wiretapped because he had instigated being the San Diego chapter of Friends of the Black Panthers. And I talked about the awkward conversations that we had with each other, and the times that we interrupted and didn't know what words meant and tried to pretend we were better white allies than we were, that I was a better white ally than I was. And my fellow students of color sat there with me and told their stories. And we just thought we were telling some stories. And the whole room, this is 250 people, ministers and students from all over the world, predominantly white, was crying at the end of our piece, and on their feet, and telling their stories, and telling us that they wanted us to come give this talk here in Florida, give this talk in South Africa, and give this talk, and come all over the world with this presentation. And that wasn't our intention. I mean, it was my vision, it was the shore, so it was our intention, but our intention was simply to be vulnerable and to row our boat towards shore and to be open to what it was that Spirit had in mind for how to get there, because I don't always know. So that's all prayer, but it's prayer mixed up with rowing, right? Because I had to do my part in order to get there. And I'm not there yet. I'm not saying I'm there. And we haven't changed the whole planet. But neither had Moses Carver when all he was doing was carrying a baby under his coat. He was just carrying a baby under his coat. You matter. There is a power bigger than you are, a power for good greater than you are, and you can use it. I'd like to close with what I would call a prayer by Ernest Holmes. He calls it a meditation. It's in the back of the Science of Mind textbook. There's so many beautiful meditations there. It's called The Power of the Word. The Word is a mighty power, and that Word is in me and through me now. My Word is one with the all-good and cannot fail to accomplish the desired ends. My Word goes forth with power onto everything that I do, say, or think. The Word is my power by day and by night. I will speak that Word and trust in the great law of life to fulfill it. I speak the Word in full confidence. And so it is.